In this second part of the lecture, our overarching question are: is high quality of life compatible with a sustainable way of life? How to approach poverty in a finite world? And an interesting tool for understanding the problem is the concept of ecological footprint, which measures human demand on nature. It estimates the amount of biological productive land and sea area needed to regenerate, if possible, the resources a human population consumes, and to absorb and render harmless the corresponding waste. The total area required to build its infrastructure, produce food and other goods and services, and to absorb the emissions from the consumption of fossil fuels. If all the strains on the biosphere, apart from environmental pollutions, are added up and converted into area magnitude, it is possible to quantify the ecological footprint that humans live on the planet. Using this concept, you will discover, for instance, that a bottle of organic wine uses half of the land needed for a non-organic bottle of wine. So this is another way to see what is really economic, cheap, and what is not. The concept of ecological footprint was invented by the Canadian scholars Wackernagel and Rees, who published the book Our Ecological Footprint: Reducing Human Impact on the Earth in 1986. And since then, the concept has been used in many studies and widely adopted by, for example, the World Wildlife Fund, or even by the European Environmental Agency. One important use has been the Earth Overshoot Day, which marks the date when humanity's demand for ecological resources and services in a given year exceeds what Earth can regenerate in that year. In 2020, the Overshoot Day fell on the 22nd of August, meaning that we are using 1.6 planets, but we only have got one. The country overshoot day shows us the inequality of consumption, with Qatar having finished their fair share of resources on February 11 and Indonesia on December 18. An interesting study that used this concept, and that you will have, and is an interesting study, is contained in the book Fair Future by the Wuppertal Institutes for Climate, Environment and Energy, which is one of the most important European centers on these issues. They try to establish a fair per capita consumption within the biosphere capacity to self-regeneration. And to remain within the load capacity of the biosphere, we can have a footprint of 1.8 hectares per capita. However, the United States have an ecological footprint of about 10 hectares per capita. And this was, about 14 years ago. And the main question of this study is it possible to have a high quality of life while at the same time having a low ecological footprint? Said it differently, is high quality of life compatible with a sustainable way of life? And to measure quality of life, they have used the Human Development Index, which combines normalized measures of life expectancy, literacy, educational attainment, and GDP. Per the they've used the Human Development Index, even though they are aware of the severe limitation of this index. And this now of using the Human Development Index and the ecological footprint is a mainstream way of looking at development and sustainability that has been embraced by the European Environmental Agency. Here, instead of hectares, it has been presented in numbers of Earths needed. For example, on the right side, you can see how many planets are needed. And on the left side, you can see the Human Development Index. And what you can see is that in the bottom right is where all the countries should be, with a high quality of life, but within the use of just one planet. And unfortunately, no countries is there with a very high level of Human Development Index, but one Latin American countries is almost there. But you can see that most European and North American country in blue, they are here with high Human Development Index, but consuming many more planets than we have. But now I want to use a little bit of an older graph from the book A Fair Future that I mentioned before to make some remarks. With the same Human Development Index, there could be very different levels of ecological footprint. For example, South Korea and the Netherlands have a high development index with a relatively low consumption of resources here. The United States and the Emirates consume the double energy and the double footprint compared to the average Western European country or compared to Japan. For example, the Netherlands has the same Human Development Index of the United States, but the United States consume almost 2.5 times more. But of course, all the developed countries consume more than 4 hectares per capita, which is more than the double of the global sustainable level. It means that they can consume that amount of resources only if someone else is not consuming it. And for example, here you can see that there are lots of African countries whose Human Development Index is very low, but also their ecological footprint is very low. The only country in the world, according to this data, that has a high Human Development Index and an ecological footprint below the global sustainable level of 1.8 hectares is Cuba. This data shows that after a certain threshold, there is no correlation between human development and resource consumption. On the basis of this data and looking at the inequalities of resource consumptions, the report Fair Future suggests a future model of justice where industrial countries drastically reduce their resource consumption, allowing developing countries to increase their consumption and meet the level of industrial countries at sustainable global level. And the sustainable global level is 1.8 hectare per capita. This is what is also called a degrowth of resource consumption. And the concepts of intergenerational justice, on the other hand, here I quote from Sachs, focus on the relationship between people living today and future generations. It extends the principle of fairness along the temporal axis and thereby widens the circle of human community to meet present needs without threatening the satisfaction of future generation needs. This was the credo of the Brundtland Commission, which laid the foundation stone for the period of the 1990s when sustainable development was on everyone's lips. Whereas posterity had previously been regarded as undeserving beneficiaries of inexorable progress, they were now seen as its potential victims. And another very important and interesting concept to look at this, to consider the damages created by humans on the environment, has been developed by Hernan Daly, who was a senior economist in the environmental department of the World Bank. And he resigned after 6 years of work at the institution. He created the concepts of uneconomic growth to describe economic growth that reflects or creates a decline in the quality of life. Uneconomic growth, I quote from him, uneconomic growth occurs where increases in production come at an expense in resources and well-being that is worth more than the items made. For instance, some economists argue that Chinese growth in some years in the past was uneconomic growth. The GDP may have grown of 10%, but the value of the environmental and social costs were greater than GDP growth, resulting in a negative balance, or said differently, uneconomic growth. From this awareness of the finite nature of our planet, a new branch of economics was created, the ecological economics. It distinguished itself from neoclassical economics primarily by its assertion that the economy is embedded within an environmental system. Ecological economists have harshly criticized neoclassical economics, which has ignored the environment. Mainstream economic theory assumes both infinite resource base and also infinite waste sinks with no feedbacks. In other words, resources never run out and pollution never occurs. This allows neoclassical economics to claim theoretically that infinite economic growth is both possible and desirable. But when we take poverty reduction in a finite world, the main message changes radically. The point is to take less rather than to give more. Without growth, the only way to cure poverty is by sharing, according to Hernan Daly. But this, of course, is something that doesn't go down very well with many people. Also, without growth, the only way to cure poverty is by sharing, or the only way to increase funds to invest in environmental repairs is by reducing current consumption. And of course, without aggregate growth, poverty reduction requires distribution. And in the reflection of Hernan Daly, while complete equality is unfair, unlimited inequality is unfair too. And seeking fair limits to the range of inequality is something possible. The civil service, the military, and the university manage with a range of inequality in income of a factor of 15 or 20. Corporate America has a range of 500 or more. This idea that we need to take less rather than give more in a finite world in terms of poverty, and this idea of sharing and reducing consumptions imply that we might need millennium consumption goals. This was suggested by Prof. Mohan Munasinghe. He was the 2007 Nobel Prize winner for peace and vice chair of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He argues the following: the richest 20 percentile of the world's population consume over 80% of global output, or 60 times more than the poorest 20 percentile. Instead of viewing the rich as a problem, they should be persuaded to contribute to the solution.